Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. Matthew and Anastasia's silver wedding fell on a Wednesday. There was a restaurant, gifts, flowers, guests. Although initially they planned to invite only the closest people, the list still grew to about 30. Anastasia twirled in front of the mirror in her new, fashionable outfit. She still looked very good, it must be admitted. You wouldn't give her more than 35. Youthful, slender, knowing how to dress tastefully and present herself well. Simply the ideal wife for a successful businessman and loving husband. And it didn't matter that Matthew, perpetually absorbed in his affairs, had completely stopped going to the gym and pool with her. He had noticeably gained weight, become heavy-set, and moved and spoke with a certain pompousness. But for her, he remained the same sweet, dear, beloved, only one. Anyway, he was. No matter how important he acted, he spent days on end at work. She had almost forgotten the last time they went out together, for dinner at a restaurant, or to a theater premiere. Her husband would just joke, "Money doesn't earn itself, Annie, and there's no time for idle entertainment. When would I have time to loaf around? You just have fun for both of us. At the bar with your friends, show off your outfit in the theater foyer. A full stomach doesn't understand a hungry one. You're our free spirit, an artist, while I'm a man with a schedule." He was up to his ears in his work. Anastasia combined her two main passions, drawing and flowers. Design comes in many forms. Her creations, whether on paper or on the ground, were always dedicated to one thing: flowering plants. For this reason, she often worked in tandem with her friend, Leocadia, or simply Leah. Leah specialized in the hard component of landscape design, stone and wood in decorating country plots. Anastasia, on the other hand, added tenderness. After her touch, various bridges, gazebos, fountains, and arches turned into exotic flower beds. She knew how to combine seemingly completely incompatible things. She teased her husband, "My Tin Woodman, my blacksmith, my Steel Knight." The reason for these nicknames was simple. He was involved in the primary processing of metals. In her mind, he transformed molten liquid mass into rough blanks, which then became raw material for mechanical engineering. She never delved into these industrial wilds. Her father had once started as a metallurgist, and then, in some way unknown to her, became the head of a metallurgical company. Well, that was fine. Why should she bother her head with it? Her mother, by the way, couldn't stand it. She divorced her father and moved to the ends of the earth with a new husband. The daughter inherited her inclination for creativity. Her mother wrote poetry, and here was the Urals, the mistress of the copper mountain ore. Technology and lyricism didn't mesh. She had to run while such an equally elevated poet called. And a teenage girl with such a rock of a father wouldn't be lost. She would grow into a real person. Theoretically, Anastasia's father had almost no time for raising a child. But he loved his Anna, that's what he called her, selflessly, devotedly, with all his heart. All other women, aside, attempts to create a new family, derailed. There were only the two of them, him and Anastasia. Any free hour was only for her. And he laid his heart and soul at her feet, back when this fragile creature was just born. He swaddled her, bathed her, played with her, melted at her sweet scent. That's why his wife, quite rightly, decided that Anastasia would be better off with her father. He raised his daughter, didn't break down, and didn't even hold a grudge against his ex-wife. He was glad that she showed her true nature not in old age, when vows, in sickness and in health, are tested, but revealed herself earlier. surfaced. Life went on. Anastasia was always curious. Could it be that her father, such a prominent, attractive man, really wasn't seeing anyone, wasn't having affairs? Although they were true friends, could talk about anything, and trusted each other, this topic seemed taboo to her. There were never any outward signs indicating romances. If you were to describe Anastasia's life before marriage in one word, prosperous, rich, interesting, warm would fit best. The girl never felt deprived because she grew up in a single-parent family, without an older woman nearby. Her father was everything to her, her entire universe. Encouraging her passion for drawing, when she was quite grown up, he bought a country plot where his daughter freely experimented with lawns, flower beds, and flowers. Let her amuse herself. For a woman, it's a perfectly decent and not foolish occupation, he would say. Seeing that Anastasia wasn't going to give up her hobby, her father sent her to study at the National Institute of Design. Before that, he sat her down with his best specialists at a computer, making her master special programs for design projects. This skill later not only came in handy for Anastasia in her studies, but it also got her married. No kidding, that's how it was. Initially, Anastasia was just getting used to Moscow. She and her father hadn't rented her an apartment yet, and she lived in the institute dormitory for some time. She handled computer tasks at an internet cafe a couple of blocks away. She would come in, order the largest cup of cappuccino, a plate of oatmeal cookies, and immerse herself completely in her latest idea, arranging yet-to-be-planted flowers on the territory of a hypothetical object. Nearby were several dormitories, including those of the Polytechnic University. The crowd in the cafe was diverse, mostly young people. That's how the future designer, obsessed with floral arrangements, and the future metallurgist, passionate about ores and alloys, met. Upon meeting him, the girl felt something familiar, as if she had met her beloved father. Fateful. Things just clicked between them right away, and it was immediately clear that both were serious about the relationship. For the long summer holidays, they went to Anastasia's hometown. There, her father organized an excursion for his daughter's friend to the metallurgical plant. The young man's eyes lit up. No entertainment, no romance, just production. That's what he enjoyed. While the guest was showering, father and daughter talked a little. "It seems to me that your young man isn't shallow. He'll become a capable professional in our field over time," the man said. "Dad, he's just as serious about me as he is about his, and possibly our shared future. I'm pregnant. We've been living with Matthew in my apartment for the last 2 months. He doesn't know yet. It was important for me to hear what you would say." "What can I say, daughter? I don't want my grandson or granddaughter to grow up in a single-parent family like you did. You shouldn't delay talking to Matthew. The fact that you're both only 19 is even good. You'll be quite young when your child is on their feet. You'll have time to be with them and to live for yourselves when they grow up. And now I'll help you with money and support. I'll support you in Moscow so you can continue your studies. I'll hire you household help, a nanny for the baby and a housekeeper. Just don't do anything foolish. Don't even think about postponing the birth. It's risky for your health, and it will become a serious test for your relationship." Matthew was over the moon with happiness when he learned that his beloved was expecting. There are different destinies and love stories. With Anastasia and Matthew, everything was so smooth, cozy, and heartfelt from the very beginning that they could be included in textbooks of family idols. Things worked out wonderfully for them. They've been together for 25 years, and they themselves are only 45. They managed everything. To go hand in hand through such a varied, vibrant, very happy life, to raise 2 sons almost to adulthood. People usually say about such couples, they are 2 halves of a whole. When the guests start raising their glasses at the silver wedding, they won't be insincere in praising their family. Anastasia twirled a little more in front of the mirror, smiled at herself. Beautiful. unadorned, beautiful. And her Maddie was just right too. She grew sad. How she wished her father had lived to see this day. He would have been happy for her and Matthew, for their sons. Though, the sons aren't in a hurry to get married yet. They offer arguments. Mom, Dad, we haven't met our other halves yet. Someone perfect, without any buts like you two. Just don't start grumbling that you'll never see grandchildren that way. Everything in its own time. After graduating from university, Matthew and Anastasia didn't stay in Moscow. Why would they need that metropolitan hustle? The young woman's father was happy to get a professional assistant in the company. He watched how Matthew handled things for a couple of years, and then immediately made him his deputy. He built a house for his son-in-law, daughter, and their 2 sons, who were born a year apart. The parents decided, since heaven sends a second child so soon, then so be it. Anastasia's father didn't start getting sick long ago, but it was sudden and severe. Tests revealed diabetes. This required a different regimen, a different pace of life. No leniency with sweets and fats. Diet, constant monitoring. Anastasia couldn't believe it. Her sensible, intelligent, educated father, when dealing with doctors, turned into a stubborn child. No authorities, no discipline, no scheduled injections. He did whatever he wanted, as if the illness had taken away his reason. As if in punishment for his protests, the illness gripped him with a death grip. After another trick with insulin, which he negligently didn't inject on time, he fell into a diabetic coma. He was home alone. By the time Anastasia rushed over, worried that he wasn't answering his calls, time had been lost. Neither money, nor Matthew's connections in medicine, nor Anastasia's frantic running around hospitals saved the head of the metallurgical company. Vital functions could not be restored. The woman felt that with her father's passing, life had ended. But her Matthew was there, her hope, her support, her rock. She survived, learned to smile and rejoice again. Now they stood with her friend Leah in the ladies' room of the restaurant, where they had come for the silver wedding anniversary. Leah joked, "Anna, well, everyone else is normal, but you and I are such beauties. You look stunning in that dress. The turquoise goes surprisingly well with your brown eyes. Who would have thought such a combination was possible? And that plump Vera with her pink suit clearly missed the mark. The fabric is good, the base is decent, but in that little suit, she looks like such a pig." 2 women, finely powdered and made up. "Yeah, I witnessed a strange little scene, like something out of a bizarre play. The banquet had been going on for a couple of hours, and they announced the first big smoke break. Yours immediately darted off to the side, into a niche, while everyone was leaving the table. My bag was nearby, on the windowsill. I reached for my lipstick and inadvertently overheard a snippet. 'With you. You know the reason.' At that moment, his gaze fell on me. He stopped short, finished in a business-like tone. 'We'll sort out all the document issues tomorrow. I have to go.'" Leocadia paused for a second, then added, "You know, Anna, that strange dialogue smelled very strongly of an affair. Or am I completely mistaken?" She laughed artificially, but it was clear the conversation wasn't easy for her. Finally, she added, "However, we're all a bit tipsy from the wine. You keep an eye on your beloved Anastasia. Maybe my story is the product of the sick imagination of a woman who stopped believing in great and bright love a long time ago. After 3 divorces, I stopped being an optimist in that area." This didn't pass without consequence for Anastasia. She grew wary, turning into pure attention and hearing. Before, she and Matthew had always trusted each other implicitly, treating their personal space with care. It never occurred to them to rummage through phones or peek into computers, not even the car's glove compartment. It was an unspoken taboo that had formed naturally. Nonsense, she imagined it. Matthew didn't say baby, my friend misheard. He never used those diminutives at home. Sweetheart, honey, kitten. He lovingly called her my Annie Pie. It wasn't that they were against pet names. They just didn't stick. At home, Matthew behaved impeccably. If he was just playing the role of a perfect husband, he would certainly have deserved an Oscar statuette. After the noisy party, he returned completely to work. He would arrive late at night. But he had had this schedule for the last 10 years. Could he have been cheating for so long, leading her on? He would have definitely slipped up somewhere. But everything was as usual. You couldn't find fault. She thought about how the flowers would behave after planting. Anastasia still didn't suspect that the seeds of doubt were also actively sprouting. The worm inside wasn't burrowing in the earth. It was tormenting her. She fought with herself, questioning her patience. Will I dare to look through my husband's phone? Or is it better not to open this Pandora's box? Her intuition was silent, offering no answer. A few days later, when the contradictions had torn her soul to shreds, she could no longer bear this torment. Late at night, she pulled his phone from under his pillow and locked herself in the bathroom. Let come what may, even if he wakes up. What's meant to be, will be. The contact list was extensive. Anastasia scrolled through it, looking at the names and faces on the avatars. She knew almost everyone, closely or casually, except for someone's initials, LVN, instead of a photo. A photo of an orchid. Anastasia, as a specialist, would not have mistaken this flower for anything else. She pressed the call button mechanically. Now no force could have stopped her fingers. Her nerves were at breaking point, her reserve of strength in the fight against the unknown exhausted. The call at 3 a.m. was unexpectedly answered by a clear, very girlish voice. Kitten, are you missing me? I'm still awake. Can you believe it? Watching a series. What about your old lady? Is she not home right now, and you decided to call? Anastasia sank onto the cold tiled floor. This was a blow below the belt. Old lady? That was probably her. And kitten, her husband Matthew. She hadn't noticed anything, but the family boat, it turned out, had already developed a deep crack. On one side, this crack was lubricated by her naivety, her belief in the nobility of the world. On the other, by trusting the person closest to her. She looked around the bathroom. Black spots swam before her eyes. A minute ago, her reliable universe had collapsed. There was no need to keep a straight face now, wet with tears trying to wash away the traces of bitter betrayal. Nothing would ever be the same. There was no longer an ideal family that had just celebrated its silver anniversary. How painful, unbearable. Anastasia shuffled into the bedroom, where her chosen one, her beloved, was still sleeping peacefully, not yet knowing that his life had just taken a sharp turn. His wife was the kind of person who, loving with all her heart, would never forgive infidelity. How many suitors had courted her over 25 years? She had rejected them sharply, ironically, explaining, "You know I'm married to the most wonderful man in the world. Could it really have occurred to you that I would trade him for any of you? That's utopian." She lay down next to her husband with difficulty. The resentment was boundless, the wound bleeding. Now he was repulsive to her. A thought buzzed in her head. I wonder whose idea it was to call me old lady. Did Matthew come up with it, or his paramour? Oh, what did it matter? She didn't know how old the owner of the clear voice was. But her husband clearly hadn't found this young treasure in kindergarten. Anastasia remembered how at Leia's birthday she had introduced them to another young lover. How her husband had fumed on the way home afterwards. No, Anastasia, explain this to me. A big age difference is a disaster. What is there to talk about? How do you spend leisure time together? Anastasia had spent a long time calming her agitated husband then. And now? It turned out all his words were lies. The axiom she had once heard in a movie, never say never. How do we know how we will behave in any given situation? Why swear in advance? Confusion, snippets of thoughts and memories. Anastasia felt like she was going crazy from this insane barrage of internal reasoning. She moved even further away from Matthew. Although she loved waking up in his arms, she would scold, "Bear, you're going to break me in half someday." But the hugs, apparently, were beneficial. My signature pies, look, Maddie, soon you won't even fit through the doorway. And he would smile contentedly, pull her towards him again, bury his nose in her shoulder and growl, "How I love the smell of your herbal shampoo, patroness of Flora. Or do you mix a potion into it so I'm enchanted by you?" This scene had happened quite recently, on Wednesday morning, the day of their silver anniversary. So, her philandering kitten had been lying. He wanted her to remain in blissful ignorance. Why? What were his goals? Anastasia had no answers. Veronica wrinkled her nose in displeasure. What were these late-night calls from Matthew? Maybe his wife woke up and interrupted? He had never called so late before. So, he really was missing her. She made herself a sausage sandwich, returned to the TV. Her lover often scolded her for her messy lifestyle. Sleeping during the day, being awake at night. She would roll her eyes languidly and argue, "But you yourself made me quit, saying my main role was to be your girlfriend, your beloved woman. You take care of the rest." And what kind of job was it? Junior commander over senior janitors. That miserable housing office. Those grumpy pensioners constantly coming to sort out utility bills. The salary was peanuts, scandals all day. I'm so happy that my knight freed his lady love from this nightmare. She knew how to convince Matthew of anything. She was stunningly beautiful, young and fresh, always in a good mood, bubbling with ideas. Next to her, he felt amazing. His wife didn't compare at all. Matthew was dying of passion. Next to her, he was ready for anything, especially when she started looking at him with an appraising gaze, and then delivered her verdict. "My God, how handsome you are. Would anyone say you're 45? I wouldn't give you more than 30. You look so young, my love. It's a miracle. We've been together for 2 years, and you're getting better looking. I respect you so much, kitten. Come quickly. I've missed you so much." Matthew didn't walk. He flew to her. He didn't care that he was 25 years older. She couldn't be so skillfully deceiving him for so long. She was truly in love, and her feelings grew with every meeting. Surely he, commanding a huge workforce, knew how to read people? They met by chance, on a bus. The man had forgotten when he last used public transport. But here was a problem. It was time to change tires. The guys at the car service had broken something. They advised him not to take a taxi. It was just a couple of minutes' walk to the bus stop through the Spring City. No inconvenience, just pleasure. Later, Matthew often thought that on the day they first met, the stars were aligned in a magical way. That it was a sign that Vera was his woman. He really didn't want to think that he had been wrong before. His whole life with his wife now seemed like a rehearsal before true love. Vera, on the bus then, smiled condescendingly and gave up her seat to an old woman. She moved to the back platform, where Matthew was standing with his briefcase. The girl was not foolish in practical matters. She immediately understood that this expensively dressed man felt out of place. When a couple vacated their seats, she decided to help the gentleman adapt, invited him to sit next to her. They started talking on this basis. There was still a good distance to go. The young Timurite captivated him with a few phrases. "You don't seem very comfortable on the bus. It's written all over your face that you deserve only a comfortable luxury car." "And what else is written, young lady?" Matthew laughed. The age difference isn't that big, the girl countered. You look 30 at most, and I'm 18. We're almost the same generation. Matthew wasn't an idiot, but this thinly veiled lie struck him down. It was completely dark outside when his neighbor got ready to get off. He invited himself to walk her to the dormitory. Veronica was studying the intricacies of housing and communal services at a training center. The man had never cheated on his wife, but here it was, as if a demon had possessed him. Everything was new, unexplored. Veronica twisted him around her little finger, and he was ecstatic. The girl was cunning and experienced. She had been through many hands. And here was a whole adult uncle, ready to walk on his hind legs, a loyal trained poodle. An expensive car, elegant clothes, delicious perfume, expensive accessories. A month later, he rented a nice apartment for Veronica in a new building. She refused a car. It was too lazy to learn the rules. Matthew came often, every other day. The rest of the time she spent idly, watching TV series, music channels, going to the sea with her friend. Matthew didn't dare take his mistress to Turkey or Greece. Interestingly, the young lady didn't like social events. Therefore, the fact that they didn't go to restaurants or appear in public didn't bother her. She belonged to the type of women who turn into homebodies over the years. Well-fed, comfortable, and that's it. No more progress needed. As the cat said in the cartoon, "We're well-fed here too." So Veronica lived happily for almost 2 years, content with everything. But as usual, something unexpected always happens in life. This time too. Her mother came to visit and started teaching her about life. You say he's been married for almost 25 years? His sons are grown? Maybe you should switch to a younger one. Why do you need this old daddy? Mom, what are you saying? Matthew is so sweet, obedient. He fulfills all my wishes. I even set aside money for you. His sons are still chicks. I've always liked older men. Her mother laughed. Go on, say you're madly in love with him. Veronica thought, I don't love him, but I'm not repulsed either. I could live with him for a long time and not know sorrow. Hearing this, her mother summarized, Well, get to work. Separate him from his wife forever. You want to get your hand into his family's money pot, don't you? So act, Veronica. To be honest, she was a little embarrassed by her mother with her village values and airs of an unrecognized queen, but it was sometimes worth listening to her. From her, Veronica learned the basics of strategy and tactics without personal experience, and their application hadn't failed yet. After seeing her mother off, Veronica thought seriously for the first time. Her mother was right. Her lover didn't shortchange her financially. That was a fact. The fact that he wasn't constantly around she even liked, who knew how they would get along. But she was only 20, and everything was easy. And in 5 years without a marriage certificate, it wouldn't be so fun. She loved children very much, saw a future with a couple of cute babies who would look at her like a goddess. She considered a family without children incomplete. And Matthew's time was running out. He had to raise their children too. So, no matter how you looked at it, it was time to change the arrangement. Matthew's children didn't count yet. She needed to catch the unfortunate lover in a net, replace the fishing rod with a hook with a reliable official net. She started talking to the man about this the next day. His reaction stunned her. He unconditionally agreed to leave his wife. He assured her that his share of the jointly acquired property would be enough for a comfortable life with his bird of paradise, his bullet, his beloved girl. Veronica pouted resentfully, started whining that he could have tried harder, come up with something clever so their income after the divorce would be substantial. Had he worked his back off for so many years for nothing? Where else could he have gotten his hands on some money? That day, Matthew returned home in turmoil. He still had no doubt that Veronica was the love of his life, his prize, and his luck. But he had never appropriated anything. Veronica insisted that they trim the company's finances. By morning, a relatively clean scheme for siphoning off money had been devised. The executive director was ready to implement it for the happiness of his beloved. Time began to run. By the morning after an almost sleepless night in the same bed with Matthew, Anastasia made a decision: to follow her husband, find out where the mistress lived, observe, and only then confront him. The morning passed as usual. Matthew sleepily greeted her, grabbed his phone, and disappeared into the bathroom. Before, she wouldn't have paid attention. Now everything seemed to have a double meaning. Her plans to postpone the confrontation fell apart with a crash. Matthew appeared a couple of minutes later. He was furious. "Anastasia, I don't understand. Did you take my phone last night?" She didn't have the strength for a conflict, but she knew how to take a hit. "Yes, I did. And I called one number. LVN. Would you care to explain?" They almost never argued. They lived soul to soul. Both were bewildered, searching for words. Then Matthew decided, "Anastasia, this had to happen sometime. You can't hide a needle in a sack. I fell in love with someone else. Neither of us is to blame. I can't help it. My passion for her is stronger than me. She is hotter than anything we had. Believe me, I didn't want to hurt you." The woman was silent. What could she say? Argue? Scream? Beg him to stay? Absurd. She didn't know what to say. Inside was emptiness, as if her heart had been ripped out and trampled. Just yesterday, they were listening to toasts, and today the old lady and the kitten found themselves on different shores. Anastasia cleared her throat. For some reason, she wanted to ask this specifically. "Why does this friend of yours call me old lady? Did you teach her that?" "Anastasia, there's a significant age difference between us, but that doesn't interfere with true love." Anastasia raised her eyebrows in surprise. Wow, her husband was habitually sharing news and feelings. This was the final chord in the requiem for their family. Her patience snapped. Inside, a volcano raged. Resentment. Incomprehension. Anyone but them, she thought. Even the pile of gifts in the living room hadn't been unpacked yet. Silver boxes, ribbons, flower vases. How to reconcile these gifts with bitter disappointment? How to live without her beloved? Anastasia tried to feel the new reality with her heart. What did she feel towards Matthew now? She couldn't answer. What was happening seemed like a terrible dream. She would wake up now, and it would all be over. She thought that now, after he left, she would put on her pajamas, cover herself with a blanket, and sleep through the rest of the night. But the intercom buzzed. The screen showed a young lady with bright makeup. When asked who she was, she briskly replied that her name was Veronica, and they needed to talk. Anastasia hadn't expected such insolence. Pressing the button, the model-like girl rushed in, ready for battle from the doorstep. "Matt told me everything. You explained yourselves. There's no need to hide anymore. Why are you looking like that? Yes, it happens. Men leave their wives for their lovers. It's natural." Words surfaced in Anastasia's mind. He who has betrayed once will betray again. And what does your old lady wife owe your visit? Do you want to say something, or have you come to dance on the embers of our family fire? Veronica sat down in an armchair without an invitation, crossed her leg, and looked around. Then she declared, "I hope you understand that this is a divorce. The sons are adults. There won't be any problems. We'll sort out the property, both the inheritance and your joint property. Matt will announce our terms later." Anastasia couldn't believe her ears. Some flighty girl, a mere chit, a gold digger, was dictating divorce terms to her? Never. She wanted a rich man? By all means. But first, his wife would dot the I's and cross the T's. She practically dragged Veronica out by the ear. She had such a look that Veronica cooled her ardor, obediently clacked on her heels towards the exit. She only had enough strength to turn around and triumphantly announce, "I'm not saying goodbye. We'll see each other again at the divorce." Anastasia filed for divorce that same day. The sons were adults. There would be no problems. But the property turned out to be more complicated. She had trusted Matthew so much that she had never read the documents he or her father brought for her signature. And they hadn't contained any tricks. Everything was registered to her and the head of the family. It was tacitly assumed that this was correct. Seeing the situation, the woman clutched her head. She had never been a business person, and now everything was leading to increasing wealth. She hadn't gone into details. There was so much in the papers that Anastasia understood. She would have to turn to her father's old friend, his lawyer and comrade. Viktor Grigorievich met her as if he knew she would come for help. "So, my dear girl, you've decided to part ways with Matthew?" "Right. A rope doesn't twist forever. My friend Konstantin foresaw that you wouldn't be in the dark for long." Anastasia stared in amazement at the gray-haired man with a sly look. The question burst out, "Dad knew about the mistress?" Viktor Grigorievich narrowed his eyes. "At first there were only suspicions. Your husband started disappearing instead of going to work. Konstantin instructed security to find out. On the day of his death, he had just received the report with photos. He managed to give it to me, gave me instructions to secure your future. And that report made him feel ill. He hurried home. I walked him to the car. He was pale, sweating, and the day was cool. I wasn't careful enough, Annie. I should have gone with him. But I had a meeting. But I carried out all his tasks. I'll show you the documents now." A couple of minutes later, the lawyer spread out the folders. She opened the first one and was stunned. Will with a condition. There was nothing in the papers about joint property after her father's death. It spoke of a villa in the UAE, a house in Switzerland, 2 apartments in Moscow, and a dacha on the Black Sea coast. The woman reread the clause. The will is to be announced only if the daughter files for divorce. If not, the property is to be transferred to the grandchildren in equal shares after their marriage. It stated that all this was acquired on his instructions by the lawyer. "How complicated," she voiced. "Why did Dad set this up?" "Not complicated, but wise," Viktor Grigorievich stated. "You could never get enough of your husband. Your union seemed unbreakable. You have a house, cars, a dacha full of flowers. The boys have everything too. Konstantin always said he didn't understand why you were such a non-materialistic person. You flit over the lawns like a butterfly. It's easy to pull the wool over someone like that's eyes. But no one understood that worldly goods were indifferent to you. You have a roof over your head, food on the table, loved ones nearby. You're happy. You wouldn't take food out of anyone's mouth. Can you stand up for yourself financially? Will you want to? Don't judge harshly. Real estate agents helped find the properties. I flew over, checked. Everything is in order. But I didn't bother you as my friend instructed. I did everything as he commanded. I presented the papers only when you decided to divorce, so you would have a spare oxygen tank or a substantial nest egg. Anastasia, you should also order a financial audit of your father's company. The controlling stake is yours. Your husband only has 20%. These young mistresses are predators, sharks. Sensing prey, they want to get everything. After the divorce, you need to find out the true state of affairs under your beloved's supervision. There will likely be a court case. It was clear that Anastasia's husband and his mistress would fight for every penny and inch of land. All's fair in love and war. Anastasia was ready for battle. She even stopped whining. Something inside had frozen into ice that wouldn't melt. If anyone had told Matthew that for the sake of a woman's eyes he would destroy the company he had given 20 years to, he would have spat in their face. But Veronica was unleashed. She wouldn't let him near, wouldn't flatter him if the process stalled. He would never have reported to a woman before. But Veronica was everything. Without her, he breathed differently. He didn't live. He just waited for their dates. He lay down with Anastasia with difficulty, afraid of calling her by another name. But it was too early to leave. He had to appease his wife, celebrate the anniversary, be a good boy. On the day he started the scams, he set a deadline for how long he would stay with the unloved one and dream of the beloved one. Veronica nicknamed Anastasia the old lady trying to look young. After talking to his mistress, all Matthew did was torment his subordinates. He introduced fines for the slightest transgression. He yelled at a foreman, and that foreman, to avoid losing his bonus, tormented those below him. Recently, Matthew, inspecting the workshops, witnessed a scene. A steelworker did something wrong, a trifle, a defect. The foreman cursed him out. The steelworker, wiping sweat, hissed, "Go to hell! You've turned the plant into a poorhouse. Is every gopher an agronomist now? Who's going to work, bosses?" People were quitting in droves. The HR department was exhausted trying to keep the core staff. Rumors spread through the city that everything at the enterprise was going haywire. And this was in addition to Matthew siphoning money from his father-in-law's brainchild under various pretexts. He didn't know what he was doing. He couldn't stop. The goal was to lower the share price as much as possible, so he could later buy the controlling stake from Anastasia for next to nothing, or at least another 31% to add to his 20. Matthew understood that after the divorce, his share of the joint property would be small. And he wasn't completely a scoundrel. He would share with his sons, whom he loved. What would be left for Veronica's greedy ambitions was almost nothing. But owning the plant, deciding the fate of the profits, that was different. He would quickly restore production and be back at the helm of the giant. Anastasia, at that moment, far from metallurgy, was poring over a project. She sat for hours with Leocadia, arranging flowers and greenery next to installations. It didn't occur to her to be interested in her father's company's affairs. It was enough that Matthew was disappearing at work. She was a delicate woman, better to reflect on flowers some more. Then there was the pleasant preparation for the anniversary, the fuss, the shopping trips. Did she think then that she was taking giant strides towards the end of a happy marriage? Of course not. After visiting the lawyer, Anastasia was again in turmoil. She linked her father's death and her husband's behavior, which had pushed her towards separation. The grief for her beloved person with his sudden death. She blamed herself that with her creative impulses she wasn't observant, didn't notice the obvious. She didn't immediately realize that she was drawing different varieties of orchids and then cutting the drawings with scissors. A thought spun in her head. I will never use this flower in projects again. An exquisite orchid is capable of wounding the soul with a hidden meaning. An orchid came and took her husband away. It's a lie that beauty saves the world. It is saved by warmth and sincerity. No one can shake me in this. By the evening of the catastrophe, both realized they couldn't be under the same roof. Anastasia wandered around the house, thinking she wouldn't be able to live here after the divorce. It was too painful to look. The photo collection alone was enough. Her eyes kept falling on them, but she had no desire to destroy anything. This was part of her sons' lives. She would tell them about the upcoming changes, about the court. Later, there was time. She feared their sharp reaction, their condemnation, that they would call her father a scoundrel and her useless, unable to keep a man. She leafed through the pages of the past. Again, what was her mistake? A fatal coincidence, or was everything predetermined? For the umpteenth time, she thought warmly of her father. How upset he would have been. Did he respect Matthew? Or did he pretend to? Anastasia remembered. Viktor Grigorievich had advised an audit, and she hadn't done anything. She had no contacts in that area. Back to Leah, and to tell her about the changes. Her friend must be burning with impatience. Had she managed to find out anything? She called Leah. An hour later, they were drinking wine in the gazebo, discussing the perfidy of the empty-headed Veronica, her greed and insolence. Anastasia K. instructed that the audit results should not be disclosed for the time being. She already knew that Matthew was a scoundrel. Leah, as always, had been busy. A friend helped with the audit. He worked in the authorities, helped prevent the case from going to court prematurely. Anastasia was as calm as a boa constrictor. She was well prepared for the meeting with her husband and his new love. Viktor Grigorievich hadn't been idle either. He had meticulously sorted through the papers. He smiled more than once. Oh, what a cunning fox his Constantine was. He had arranged something regarding the property 100 times, a saga with documents, and he had slipped a prenuptial agreement to his son-in-law, and Anastasia's signature was on it. He needed to call her, find out if she was aware that in case of proven infidelity, the husband loses rights to joint property. The lawyer thought again. With a loved one, paradise is in a hut. Only the loved one would hardly agree. Viktor Grigorievich was worried that the judge might declare the infidelity clause invalid. The husband would still get his lawful half. In the phone conversation, Anastasia confirmed that she knew about the prenuptial agreement. When her father was preparing it, she was engrossed in a seaside order, signed it on the go, without reading, completely trusting her father and husband. Viktor Grigorievich was taken aback. So, Matthew knew too. What a strange family they were. Signing without looking, trusting for a while, and then sacrificing everything on the altar of passion. Strange are your ways, love. You know how to deprive people of reason. Veronica stoically endured Matthew's presence. There were several reasons. Firstly, the court was 2 weeks away. Secondly, the test was positive. She might be considered shallow, but one thing couldn't be denied: a strong maternal instinct. She already dreamed that they would get married, live in prosperity. She had already learned to play at love, flawlessly. Before going to bed, she thought of how she would deliver the news. Kitten, how am I like a chipmunk? He would start guessing, knowing that anything could be expected from her imagination. She would blurt out, You didn't guess. I'm a chipmunk because I also have 2 stripes. Darling, we're going to have a baby. She squeezed her eyes shut. She imagined how Matthew would carry her in his arms, shower her with gifts, buy her a wardrobe, provide a dowry. They would need to talk about kicking the wife out. The family should live in a palace. It wouldn't do for the baby to be cramped. Matthew, unsuspecting, prayed to heaven that Veronica wouldn't get pregnant. He was getting on in years. He could do without any kinder surprises. He had sons. That was enough. They were good together. He'd rather spoil her. The man had no doubt that it would end in triumph. He knew that Anastasia was a decent, generous person. She would share. She must understand that love doesn't ask questions. She still had the plant. He needed to tell Veronica to behave herself. Anastasia sat in the courtroom, looking around the full hall. Leah supported her from behind, whispering impressions. Her friend sat silently beside her, waiting for the command to attack. From Matthew's satisfied face, embracing Veronica, he wasn't expecting any surprises. Anastasia decided. The session was tedious. The judge was studying the case, but there would be questions. First, the agenda was announced, the participants introduced. Matthew wondered why this circus. But then Viktor Grigorievich took the floor. He announced that during preparation, a number of circumstances had come to light. He placed copies before the judge and asked for clarification. He read everything: the prenuptial agreement, the will with conditions. At the end, he added that the authorities had questions for Matthew after a covert investigation. The judge nodded understandingly. Matthew's world collapsed. Veronica clung to his sleeve, whispering, "I don't understand. We won't get anything. We'll be left with nothing. I'm pregnant, Matthew." Her lover stared with glazed eyes. While the court withdrew to deliberate, Leah's friend showed Matthew a keyring with handcuffs. Matthew understood the hint. He calmed down. It no longer mattered that he would be left with nothing, and his wife would become richer. He would be going to prison for a long time. It would be good if he wasn't arrested now. Anastasia had won. He had suffered a fiasco. Veronica, sitting next to him, buzzed, accusing him. And he thought, maybe she didn't love him. She loved money. She was happy with gifts. She flattered him, achieving her goal. Matthew flinched. Had Veronica said something about pregnancy? Or had he misheard? That was all he needed. To be left without money even for diapers. Would she wait? He glanced at the princess, admiring her manicure. Amazing carelessness, the habit of him taking care of everything. Had she forgotten what she heard? Did she think the judge would announce the verdict now, and she would leave rich? Matthew barely listened to what the judge was reading. He only understood that after the divorce, he would be left with almost nothing. Veronica remained in speechless infantilism. She understood that this wasn't a decision, but a verdict on her hopes. A thought pounded in Veronica's head. Whatever happens, I won't get rid of the baby. Even if Matthew has problems, I'll do everything myself. She didn't say it aloud. No one, seeing her pretty face, would have thought she took motherhood so seriously. Sometimes emptiness only seems empty. Anastasia left satisfied. She already knew that Matthew would be detained tomorrow on charges of fraud. Did she feel sorry for him? Strangely, she did. Anastasia wasn't vengeful. She wanted justice. Her heart had stopped aching. She wanted to go back to her sketches, drown herself in flowers, forget, but not to seek revenge anymore. For a second, it seemed as if the statue of Themis had dropped her blindfold and winked approvingly. Viktor Grigorievich's phrase came to mind. The law is harsh, but it is the law. Anastasia and Leah sat in the garden, drinking red wine, chatting. The grandchildren were playing on the lawn. Leah grumbled, "Anna, I understand the dacha by the sea is huge. You're bored alone. I approve of you taking the grandchildren for the summer. But why are you also bringing Veronica's daughter to visit? It's absurd." Anastasia looked up, narrowed her eyes, adjusted her headband. "Leah, Veronica is now a mother and a wife to Matthew. She travels to the prison, sends parcels. I didn't think that would surprise me so much. It doesn't hurt me. My sons and their families are well off. What more could I wish for? Everything happened as it happened. It's a pity Matthew decided to show his character. He was rude to the authorities in the colony. Missed out on parole. Sometimes I feel like I didn't know my husband well. I was flying in the clouds, and he was treading the earth. Veronica saw something else in him. Not a sitting duck. Look, she gave birth to his child. She's studying by correspondence. She'll get her diploma soon and wait for Matthew. I'm sure." Leah chuckled conspiratorially. "Well, friend, the court is clear. Okay, I won't tease and ask about the gentleman who was circling yesterday. It seems he's your new friend. I approve. Very impressive. And judging by his outfit, he's one of ours too. Creative." Anastasia immediately threw a peach pit at her curious friend. "My life here is gaining new meaning. I don't want to scare it away. So I'm not telling you yet. I promise. You'll be the first one to wish me luck. May happiness settle nearby again.